Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to start on a positive note in a debate that has so far been incredibly moving, even to those who are the most battle-hardened and battle-weary as myself. It has been incredibly moving. The positive is that today, this morning, the government released information around the protection of women's refuges from some of the changes to the housing benefits bill that was going ahead. And I want to pay credit to the government for finally listening on the issue, but also to say that in this House on these matters we must work together, and today all of us here, the stories that we hear today have got to go some way to getting change in this area. So this is now our next fight, and I think it's a fight that the public are going to get pretty involved with, as the Archers, I believe, is about to enter into the family courts if what Rob Titchener said at the end of the episode on Friday is anything to go by, and that has done a huge amount to raise awareness of the issue, and the family courts is an area that really, really needs some of that. So I want to pay a huge credit to the member for Penistone, Stocksbridge, the member for Hove and Port Slade, or just Hove, and the Right Honourable Member for Basingstoke for securing this debate. The testimony about Claire's story from the member for Penistone and Stocksbridge was incredibly moving. We've heard heartfelt and heartbreaking accounts across the House of what is happening to victims of domestic violence in the family courts, and having this debate today is incredibly important for a number of reasons. The first is to send out a rally cry to all the victims in this country and their children that down here in this bubble that we can hear them. The family courts in this country, for those who have never had anything to do with them, and for most of the people who have, are incredibly secretive. They are wrapped up in confidentiality, where children get called P1, P2, X4, and they get no media attention for this reason. It is very difficult to report on what goes on there. So today, here in this place, it is our chance to flood some much needed light onto that darkness and see what our institutions are really doing for the people in the UK. I will.
I thank her for giving way. Does she agree with me that there's still much work to be done to ensure that the police get the cases to court? The case of my constituent, Louise, suffered the most terrible abuse, but has never had that day in court, not just a personal tragedy for her, but a national scandal for all of us.
I agree entirely with my honourable friend, and I think that actually in this place we've got some reasons to be really proud of efforts that have been made by successive governments year in, year out. The laws in this country are relatively good when it comes to domestic violence. Where we fail time and time again is in how we implement those laws, and you don't need to look very much further than many police reports on assessments of how the police are handling cases of domestic violence to see that we need to do more. I think in this place sometimes we make up laws and they open an enormous door into an empty room, and that is a problem for victims. And what I want to say to the victims who may be watching this, and lots have been in touch with me to say that tell their story, want their stories heard, and what I'm sure everybody in this place wants to say, the most important message, and a message victims of domestic and sexual violence rarely hear, is that we believe you. And that is those three words. If every single one of us could just tell everybody to stand and say, we believe you, we could change things for victims of domestic violence who are frequently disbelieved by every single agency that they are put in front of. The second reason that today's debate is so important is to educate ourselves as legislators. My honourable and very dear friend, the member for Hove, and I have chatted about this subject over many times over the past 6 months. On many occasions he has sort of bounded up to me and said, and been stunned by a case that he has, as if this is the worst case in the whole world. And I'm sure, will give voice to some of those examples today of the very shocking stories. He is always so shocked and horrified and angry about every case. And for me, the cases have become more expected. My years of working with victims of violence have in many ways numbed me, although I'm only human, to some of them. I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. She talks about her years of working with victims of domestic violence. I too worked in that field, and one of the things that I found was frightening was that courts tend to think of domestic violence only in terms of bruises or of injury. And there is still, and the Archers have been brilliant at showing the impact of coercive and abusive behaviour, but there is an incredible naivety in believing that coercive and abusive behaviour to mothers will not also happen to children, and that if legal aid were available, it would be a huge help to those women to protect themselves.
I couldn't agree more, and I will come back on to the issues of legal aid in a minute, but the government, the opposite, have certainly tried with the law to look at coercive control, and we're too early down the line in that legislation to see if something as complex. To me, it's not actually that complex. We make this excuse that it's difficult to understand. I don't find it difficult to understand, so I'm not sure why I'm constantly cutting everybody some slack. We should be able to understand the gaslighting, and the Archers, I think, has definitely done something. And Henry in the Archers, the small boy, there's no doubt about it that that child has been coerced, controlled. So it's harrowing. I feel chills even thinking about it. Anyway, so on one occasion, going back to this lovely member from Hove here, he ran up to me and he said to me, "Jess, I just don't understand why people are still walking around in the street. How can they carry on with their lives when this is happening? Why are they not screaming out about the awful family court system?" So today, in this place, we have a chance to help other colleagues here, and most importantly, the members in front of us on the government benches, see what we, all of us as a country, are sanctioning at the moment in our court system. Here in this place, we have the power and agency to change this for every victim in the country, and especially for every victim whose children have died. We must use our agency to do what they would do in a heartbeat if they were anywhere near as privileged as every single one of us. And so to our agency to change this, I turn to the report of the Domestic Violence APPG in conjunction with the report on the motion today from Women's Aid. And I would ask the Minister here today to give us some assurances about what we are actually going to do about this. I love warm words. I say them myself. I want hard actions. Myself and the Right Honourable Member for Basingstoke had attempted to begin this conversation with the previous Justice Secretary. However, politics is a fickle game, and so it now falls to a fresh Justice Secretary to make her mark on the job. And I think it is important to state that currently we could be considered to be breaking the law on these issues in the UK as a member currently, for now, of the European Union. We sign up to specific directives on protecting victims, and one directive explicitly states that we will uphold the protection of victims within our court system, and contact with offenders must be avoided. And therefore, in all new court buildings that are built, chance to be a fine thing at the moment, must have separate waiting areas as an example of that. Every single day in the UK, we are breaching that. We will hear today about victims who are not just in the same waiting area, as we've already heard, but are allowed to be cross-examined, even bullied, by the very people who have abused them for years. In the criminal courts, this would be considered a severe breach of human rights. It would also completely fly in the face of the Achieving Best Evidence standards. and most likely the evidence would be thrown out. We don't allow, and for years we all campaigned, people in this place, before they were in this place, campaigned to have children taken into video rooms. We had partitions, we had separate waiting rooms. Those things have all happened. A quarter of the women surveyed by Women's Aid were found to have been directly cross-examined in the family courts by their abuser. This issue is rising as a direct result of the cessation of legal aid and the rising number of citizens acting as litigants in person. When I asked the Justice Department a number of months ago for figures on the number of litigants in person in the civil and family courts, I was told that they don't monitor that information. Might I gently suggest, because I'm in a good mood because they've done something good today, that the Justice Minister, that is simply not good enough. We have to look at trends and what is happening in our courts. I want also to make the point that, and there is a pervasive myth that family courts are unfairly biased towards mothers. I think we will hear today all sorts of examples of why that is not the case. And that, you know, doesn't matter how many times you scale up the building dressed as Spider-Man, women are still badly treated in our family court system. This is especially pertinent when it comes to those with a history of domestic violence. The Domestic Violence APPG inquiry found that there is no evidence to suggest that it is the case that women are favoured. On average, only 1% of applicants to family courts in the UK have access to refused. Only 1% are told that they can no longer see their children. And 70% of all cases in front of the family courts are victims of domestic violence. So 1% of 70% of all cases are told that they can't see their children. In 3/4 of cases where courts have ordered contact with an abusive parent, children suffer further abuse. Some children have even been ordered to have contact with a parent who has committed offences against the children themselves. Children have even, as we've heard, been killed as a result of residency arrangements. I want to stress as well that an abusive partner can force a victim into the family court, or in fact any civil court in the UK, as many times as they like. This isn't a judgment you get handed down, your case falls, and then you don't get another bite at the cherry. You can go as many times as you like. You can chase a woman around the country taking the same claim against her, and there is nothing that will stop that. There is no doubt that in many cases, violent perpetrators use the family court system not to get their children, but to continue stalking and continue a reign of terror. The Domestic Violence APPG have 7 recommendations that will dramatically improve the lives of women. They fall almost exclusively in line with the report from Women's Aid. And we want to see victims and children protected and respected in our courts, and at the very least to the same level that we have in our criminal courts. I have a copy of the recommendations that I can hand over to the ministers today, and I really hope that the ministers here will listen to what they are hearing here today and act as some of their colleagues have today to do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Melanie, on.